walks with me. And oh, how he tells me, I am his own, that I am his own. He knows Jesus knows my name, yes, he knows my name. And I'm glad about it, he knows my name, and he knows my name. And oh,
well, welcome to Preacher Conversation. And I'm actually out of town in a hotel lobby, but we got to do what we're going to do to get it done because this preacher is busy. Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Good morning, man. Good morning. Good morning. I'm blessed. How are you, man? Where you at?
I'm in St. Louis in a meeting, and we finish up on Wednesday, but we got to do what we got to do and everything.
Absolutely. Well, prayers that meeting is successful.
Well, this morning I'm interviewing Dr. Robert Davis. He's the minister of the Drayton Hills Church of Christ in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So I always start off by asking Dr. Davis, tell us about yourself. Tell us. I just told the audience where you preach and where the church is, but tell us a little bit about who you are, your family life, and anything you want us to know. All right.
Okay. Yeah, man. Robert Davis. Those who know me, they call me Rob. I am, of course, the minister at Drayton Mills Church of Christ in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I've been there since 2016. We were originally 6B Church of Christ. We kind of outgrew that area, so we purchased a facility downtown and assumed the name. It's in the Drayton Mills area, across from the historic Drayton Mills. So we assumed the name Drayton Mills Church of Christ. I am married to my college sweetheart, Courtney Davis, or I should say Dr. Courtney Davis. She was a doctor before me. We have 4 beautiful children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Wright, my oldest son, Carter, my daughter that came after, Carson, my other daughter, and we just had Brooks about 11 months ago. So we're done. We're done with the tribe. 4 kids. That's all I can handle. But for those that don't know, I'm pretty easygoing. I'm an avid sports guy. I played nothing but sports growing up, man. So any and all things sports, that's me through and through. You know, if you know me, also know my son is really big into baseball right now, and we've turned into a baseball family. So that's what we do. My daughters dance, and I just enjoy spending time with family, man. I just love spending time with family. I come from a huge family. I'm one of 8 children. And so I'm just family guy through and through. But that's pretty much, man. That's pretty much the nuts and bolts of who I am.
Well, that's a lot. I was trying to take notes as you were talking and then getting distracted by the hotel lobby and all that kind of thing. But 2 doctors in one house. What kind of discussion do you guys have? Okay. Tell me what your doctor is in and what your wife's is in.
Okay, so I'll start off with my wife. She is a doctor of nursing practice. So she is a nurse practitioner at the hospital. She's a hospitalist. So basically, wherever they need her to go and assess patients and prescribe medicine, she's there. She'll go to the ICU. She'll go to the heart center. She'll go to the oncology wing. She'll go anywhere. So she's pretty well versed on any floor. So she doesn't technically have a specialty. She's just kind of like an all-purpose nurse practitioner. So she got her doctorate first at Oklahoma City University. And she was doing that program while I was doing my Master of Divinity at Oklahoma Christian in Edmond, Oklahoma. My doctorate was done at Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte, and it is a doctor of ministry with emphasis on apologetics. So the proof and defense of Christianity.
All right, that's good. We're going to talk about that a little later in the broadcast. But you guys are well balanced, man. You able to deal with the body and the soul. You know,
Sure.
body, soul, and spirit, and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now you mentioned sports, man.
Mm.
I'm a high school athlete in basketball. What was your sport area that you participated in?
Basketball, man. Basketball. I've actually seen some of your news clippings
Yeah.
on Facebook, man, back in the day.
Man,
But yeah,
back
basketball, football, and track are the three sports that I did growing up.
yeah. Well, back in the day, I was just surrounded by great people, and they just let me be on the team. You know, they you, I was a 10-point guy at one of our stars. We called him. He had a nickname Golden Nolan, and he was
Okay.
like he get like 20 some rebounds a game, and I used to tease him, or they used to tease me. He was rebounding all the shots I missed, and everything.
And see, the fact that you were taking the shots lets me know that you were a real guy on the team, because they don't
Oh
see that
yeah,
anyway. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, they call it a gunner back in those days. I was gonna take a shot and
yeah,
everything.
for
Yeah.
sure, for
Well,
sure, for
well, do
sure.
you still work out or play? Are you
Yeah,
involved? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, man. I still try to stay as active as possible. I was a point guard, man. God did not bless me with your height, so but I can handle the rock, man. I got a good grip on the rock, good vision on the rock, and I really enjoy the one thing in our brotherhood is there's a lot of competitiveness, man. When we
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
basketball, especially among the preachers, but
Yeah.
when we get together, we have these tournaments. I dog them out, man. You can ask
Is
anybody.
that right?
I
Oh
destroy them.
man.
I
Yeah.
destroy everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still try to stay active, man, and play whenever I can, and
Yeah.
play church leagues and stuff like that.
All right. Well, I'd
Yeah.
like to see that. I'm not gonna get involved. I'm on the sidelines, either coaching or trying to referee or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got you. I got you.
So home is South Carolina. That's your
Home is
home.
South Carolina. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, let's shift a little bit. Tell us about what I call your come to Jesus experience or your conversion experience. What was that like? How did that happen? What was when did that happen? That kind of thing.
Right. So I would say that it's kind of twofold, right? My conversion experience and it's twofold because I came to Jesus when I was younger, um, but I truly believe that my actual conversion experience is linked with my uh, call into ministry. But if I can just go back, I'm born and raised Church of Christ. I am like four, five generation Church of Christ. So I was raised in church. I was raised going to church every Sunday. I was raised being active in church every Sunday. So I believe that when I came to Jesus and was baptized for the first time, I might have been around the age of like 10 or 11 years old. But I'm a church boy through and through. All I know is church. You couldn't get me out of church. Even if I was still preaching, I would still be going to church. So um, I am, uh, I'm just one of those children who kind of absorb the faith of their parents. And it wasn't until later that it actually became my own. So I wouldn't say that I was somebody who kind of just was sitting in the world and then came, but I was born and raised and reared, man, in the pew.
Well, who are some of the church leaders or members who made a significant impact in your life? We have a little bit in common. Uh, Basketball players, growing up in the church, and I can think about men and women who impacted my life in church. So who are some church leaders or church members that made a significant impact in your life?
Sure. So I grew up under the leadership of Jack McNeil at Park Street Church of Christ in Columbia. And the one thing about Jack is he's just a tremendous leader of of people, and particularly of men and young men. And I can just remember as a young man, my parents would drop me and my brothers off at the church during the week, and they would Jack would take us under the wing, and he would teach us every aspect of worship service. He would teach us how to serve. We would clean up the building. We would run errands with him. We would go to his house. So he kind of had his hand on us a lot. And then we would have fun. We would play basketball together. He would set up the goal in the parking lot, and we would just shoot around. So Jack is one of the guys that I kind of have the most history with. And then as I got a little older and got to college and past college, I would say a preacher by the name of Samuel Means, who I actually succeeded when he passed away in 2017. So, and Sam was just the model of humility and just gentleness and kindness and just sincerity in his heart for Jesus and for the ministry. I'm so appreciative of just having to had my limited experience with him, but man, he's just a giant of a man, even though he's so small and quiet.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had a connection with Jack McNeil, and I've spoken with Jack, and he talks about his basketball days as well. You know,
Yeah,
I think Jack was pretty tough on the court, man. You know, back in those days.
I got you.
Well, let's talk about your call to ministry. You mentioned that, and um, in churches of Christ, you know, we don't often use the term call to ministry, but I think that if we really, you know, look at it, you know, God works with us. Sometimes, you know, young men grow up as they grow up, they want to be a preacher, and sometimes it's later on in life. But I'm curious, and I think we need to talk about that in churches of Christ. How did we get there? How did we get into the pulpit? So, what was your call to ministry?
I would say, man, mine is very similar to the Damascus Road experience. Um, I was one of those ones that I kind of felt like I always had a tugging into ministry from a child. I remember um, I might have preached my first sermon whenever I was like 10 years old, 11 years old. I always remember also just being in the pews and being just enamored by the ministry of the word. So
Yeah,
when Jack was preaching, I just remember just thinking it, you know, man, this is how I would say this. This is how I would deliver this. It was just like a draw there. And from the age of probably like 10, 11 to about 13 or so, I actually was like traveling to like local churches and preaching, and everybody was like, man, here's this little short kid that's preaching. Funny memory is I think the first time I preached at Park Street, Jack actually had to get some pieces of wood and build this little step stool, this platform for me to stand on so that people could see me behind the
yeah,
pulpit. So
right.
I had that. And then, man, I think the pressures of it, right, kind of got to me as I hit my just kind of hit my teenage years, right? There
Yeah,
was a lot that I think the pressure from members just, you know, of I kind of felt like I couldn't make a mistake, you know, as a
yeah,
kid. And if you did anything, it's like, hey, you know, you're a preacher. Don't do this, don't do that. And so I kind of ran away. I ran away, and I kind of actually took a complete step back
yeah,
from all ministry. So throughout high school, I used to do like singing or lead the communion. I just kind of stepped back from all of that. And then by the time I got to college, I just was rarely going, you know, on to church. Period. I just kind of just was rarely going, and then I really felt this burning call, and I was speaking with my now wife at the time. I just kept telling her, I think God is calling me into ministry. I think God is calling me into ministry, even though my career path was to go to medical school. My undergraduate degrees in biology. I have a minor in chemistry, another minor in psych. My sister had just went through medical school. One of the elders from the church I grew up at is a trustee at a medical school that I was going to, but I just kind of had a pivot, and I ended up having some heart issues where I had to wear this heart monitor for several weeks, well, actually several months, to where my heart was doing something funny with these irregular beats. And when it would trigger, whoever was monitoring it could literally call me through the heart monitor and ask me, hey, did you feel that? Or if it was an emergency, I could push a button on there to let them know, hey, check the monitor. And so then one night I kind of had an episode where I just couldn't breathe, heart was going crazy. And the ambulance came and picked me up from the apartments on campus. And I remember laying on the gurney thinking, well, I'm going to die at this moment. And just remember kind of being absolutely just devastated that I never truly stepped into that calling that I knew God was calling me to. And I made a promise to God, man, that if I did, in fact, make it out of that, I would no longer try to run away from that calling. But I would step into it with 2 feet. So once I got through that, man, I literally left. I left school.
Yeah.
After I graduated, I was a senior. I left. I went to Southwestern and for like a semester. And then the professors were like, you already have a degree. Go to grad school. So I went to Oklahoma Christian, man. Oklahoma Christian. And that's kind of like how I morphed into ministry.
Yeah. Well, we do have some similarities because my call came later in life, even though I grew up in the church and I'd already had my bachelor's and then my call, I thought about Southwestern, but at that time, all they offered was an associate degree. And I said it wouldn't make sense to go back and get the associate. So I went to Abilene Christian and got my master's. That's real interesting to hear Dr. Davis and to hear about his call and everything. Dr. Davis, I wanted to ask, you mentioned your first sermon. Do you remember that first sermon, what it was like in the title and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was something crazy, man. It was something that I was trying to be clever with. Man, I'm trying to remember. It was named after one of the songs that were popular at the day. And the reason why I remember that is because I when I read it to Brother McNeil, his eyes got kind of wide and was like, where are we going with this? But man, it might have been entitled like Shake Your Fast or something like that. Something I was trying to be clever. Or show me what you're working with. Something like that. Something I was trying to be clever with. But it really had nothing to do with the song, but more so just kind of a examination of how culture has impacted young people.
Yeah.
And so it was something along those lines. It was something crazy, man.
Everything you said is just triggering memories to me. I remember we had youth rallies in Hopewell, and one year, one of the topics was "I Believe I Can Fly." That's when R. Kelly had put that out.
Right.
And Dr. Eugene Lawton saw my flyer, and he called me. He said, "What is this? I believe I can fly." Like I got to explain it to him and all that, and everything. So that, what's your sermon prep like now? And then let me, as we talk about sermon prep, how would you define your preaching? There's expository, there's textual, there's narrative preaching, topical preaching. Share with us your approach to preaching and what sermon preparation is like.
For sure. So I would say, if you've ever heard me preach, I am pretty much your textbook definition of expository. Honestly, you can give me one verse and that's where I'll frame the sermon from. I really don't like to cover too large of passages at one time. I really like to take my time with it. So I'm expository. You give me couple verses, and I'll preach from there and continue on down. I would say in terms of sermon preparation, I am a huge believer in scholarship and the higher and lower criticisms. So even criticisms that sometimes people ignore, like maybe textual criticism or things like that. But I'm a huge believer in scholarship. A lot of my preaching, I would say, is it features a lot of scholarship. Um, in terms of my sermon preparation, I always take a macro to micro approach. I like to figure out, if once I figure out what my passage is going to be, what's the macro story that is going on here biblically. So if it's the book of Philippians, where does the book of Philippians fall within the canon narrative, right? Then how does it factor into the New Testament flow? Where does it lie? What's the passage there? Then how does it fall within the Pauline corpus? Where does it lie, right? And then the prison epistles, and then I work down into what basically your socio-historical criticisms, right? What's going on in Philippi? Why is he writing to Philippi? Who is he writing to? And then that's when I try to get into things like authorial intent, and and then I work my way down into the passage, where I'm a real big believer in just what I call word work, right? So I love to engage the Greek text. I love to engage the Hebrew text if that's what we're working with. The semantics that are there, because I just truly believe, man, that the power in preaching is not in my mind. The power in preaching is not in what I can say that's clever. I can say something that may be very helpful to people, or that can give people a sense of direction. And it may be helpful, but it's not authoritative for their life and for shaping their soul. The one thing that's going to shape their soul is the word of God. So I have to pull out exactly what does this Bible say, and allow that to be able to grow people's souls. So I'm a real big believer on, if I give you a text that I'm going to preach, I'm not going to try to give a surface scraping of it. I want you to understand that when Paul writes this, this is literally what he's saying to them.
Yeah.
And then try to help people with that so what question. I like to not leave that out there. After I give a sermon, the so what is what I call helping your members to see, how does this apply to my life? I know what it means to them, but so what? Like, how does it step there?
Yeah.
So the application of it, man, I try to not leave the sermons out there, but sometimes sermons, they apply themselves if you do a good enough job of the explanation. So I basically take a macro to micro approach to all sermon prep.
That's powerful, man, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And you got a bright future, man, and keep doing what you're doing. Okay.
I appreciate it,
when we talk about preachers, you mentioned Jack McNeil. You mentioned the preacher that you succeeded. Who are some other preachers that kind of stand out? Let me be transparent. I listen to preachers outside of our fellowship. My doctor of ministry was at Union Theological, which is a Baptist seminary. So I was introduced to a lot of preachers outside of our fellowship. So I could just name guys like Terry Anderson that stands out to me.
I love it.
Man, if I could have a sit down conversation with Terry Anderson, I would try to, influence him because he's already influenced me. But man, I doubt I don't know how successful I would be. But Terry Anderson is one of the guys that I listen to. And then there's a plethora of men in our fellowship. Who are some of the preachers that sort of stand out to you in this age?
Yeah. So I think whenever I first got into ministry, I listened to a lot of W.F. Washington. The reason being is he was just a preacher that my dad always spoke about. You know, I didn't know much about him. I don't really remember if he came to Park Street whenever I was a child. I didn't really know him, but my dad used to just talk so glowingly about him. So I figured that, like any preacher or anything that you do in life, if you want to be effective in it at all, you need to be able to examine models of it, excellent models of it. If you're a basketball player, you don't just become a basketball player by going to the gym, picking up a basketball and dribbling. You look at Michael Jordan, you look at Isaiah Thomas, you look at LeBron James, you look at Kyrie Irving, you look at these guys, man, who do it to the highest level. Same thing as a musician, right? You study the Michael Jacksons and Princes and James Browns and the guys today. So, man, I listen to a lot of W.F. Washington. I listen to a lot of Orpheus, Hayward. I listen to guys like Alvin Daniels. I listen to a lot of guys. I listen to a lot of preaching, period. I used to listen to music whenever I worked out, but now I listen to just mostly preaching. And even outside of our fellowship, if I'm listening to a guy, it's typically because he's expository. It just kind of falls in line with me. Like a Terry Anderson. I love his approach. I love his tone and how he preaches. He kind of cuts it straight and it's like no chaser with it. Man, he's really good at that. You know, an H.B. Charles, who was very, very close to the text. Those type of guys, man. A Charles Dates. So I listen to a lot of guys, man, that are all over, man. But mostly I listen to guys who are expository. If they're not expository, then they're pretty much textual. So
Yeah. You know, growing up, man, you know, Dr. Lawton made an impression on me. I mean, when I heard him preach, I said, now that's the guy that I would want to model after. And this would be in the 80s, you know, that kind of thing. And then there's some of my contemporaries that do just an excellent job, like William Jones and Jeff Carruthers and David Lane. You know, those guys can unpack a text in a way, and everybody has their own gifts and approach. But guys like Terry Anderson, H.B. Charles, man, if I could just have a conversation and persuade them to come over to Churches of Christ. And some people might say they might end up persuading me, you know, and everything. But you know, when I listen to those guys, it's for different reasons. It's not necessarily for their doctrinal stance,
for sure.
But sometimes it's their delivery, you know, their delivery and their handling of a certain text and everything. But yeah, that's good. Well, Doc Davis, let me ask this. What advice would you give to someone who says to you, hey, look, I'm interested in ministry. I want to go into ministry. I think the Lord is calling me into ministry. Or what advice would you give to a person who's just getting started or showing an interest? Say somebody, I want to be a preacher, you know, what advice would you give to that person?
Okay. Yeah, man. The first thing I would relate to them are two things that I wish people would have told me or somebody would have told me. The first thing would probably be that ministry is the most difficult career, and I use that word hesitantly. It's the most difficult career on this planet. That nothing gets harder than ministry and trying to shepherd people's souls. The second thing I would relate to them is that you have got to be prepared for rejection, because ministry in and of itself is difficult. It's difficult physically because you're up at all times of the hour. You can't clock out like another job. If something happens, man, you gotta get up and go. It's difficult mentally because you experience vicarious trauma, the things that people struggle with, they lay them on you. People who have substance abuse. I've had people call me while they were inebriated, and I had to make sure that they could find somebody to get them home. I've had people who called and said they've had family members missing, and we've had to try to put our heads together and figure out how can we locate these people. You have people who are ill, and you're showing up to the hospital and you have to watch them die. You have people who've lost loved ones. I just funeralized a member yesterday, and she was one of the church mothers, and people who she's known for 80 years now are grieving. So, and all of that comes on to you. So you experience, even though it doesn't happen directly to you, the vicarious trauma that you experience just by being a minister, that weighs on you. Then the psychological trauma of understanding the magnitude of the ministry, that you are responsible for trying to shepherd people's souls, for trying to help pull them close to God, and not just pull them close to God, but help kind of keep them there and help corral them whenever they step out of line or they try to walk away. And you have to do all of that while trying to manage yourself, manage your own demons. And it's really difficult when you're struggling with your own relationship with God, but yet you have to sit down and craft messages about how to be close to God. That's just an impossible calling. And it's just tough. So you're worn out spiritually, you're worn out mentally, you're worn out physically. And then on top of that, you give everything to the ministry. And it's not going to be enough for the people. Some will love you, some will love you. And I would dare to say most will love you. But you're still going to be rejected by many that are going to see what you do. And if there's one time in which you don't come through, your credibility drops. Or if there's one time where you drop the ball, your credibility drops. If there's one time you lose your cool, your credibility drops. So I say that the calling of a minister is the most difficult on the planet. It's just something that men do not have the ability to do on their own, which is why you have to understand that this is all God's plan. God's going to make it work, man. Somehow, some way, through and through. He's going to make it work.
It's definitely a call, man, and you have to be committed to that call. And I think sometimes when individuals think about ministry, they think about it just from the pulpit. But man, that's probably the easiest part of it. Once I get my lesson together, and present it, I'm ready to present it. But even the work of putting the lesson together, the study, the research, the organization, and then you talked about the other side of ministry of helping members get past their hurts and that kind of thing. And then the rejection, you're gonna have some that love you, but you're gonna have some that make your life real difficult as well. So you've got to be called to that and everything.
And you still gotta love those people on top of that. You gotta love people who try to hurt you. You have to still love them.
You gotta love them, man. Let me ask this. Go ahead.
Let me say, and just in speaking of the like your sermon prep, it used to take me a really, really long time because I didn't know how to preach when I came out of seminary. I know a lot of people think that they teach you to preach in seminary. They don't. Seminary and grad school is mostly just equipping you with tools to be able to study and research. But the actual homiletics portion of it is, you got to figure that out. But I remember, now it takes me probably about 25 hours or so to put together a message, and you spend all of these hours really grinding out a message. And then at the end of it, you don't know if the people truly received it or not. Like, you don't know. And that's another hard part about ministry, is that you pour your heart and soul into your messages and in your sermon series to really help shape these people, but you can't see that change in their heart. So that's another thing, is like, well, you got to keep going and just trusting that you're planting seeds and God is going to bring forth the harvest. So,
good stuff, man. Good stuff. I appreciate you sharing with us and being open and transparent in your sharing. You grew up in the church. This is probably the last question. You grew up in the church. You were called to the ministry. You shared with us that experience. But what's the current state of the church in your mind? Everybody that I ask has a different take on it, and that's okay. I'm not looking for a pet answer.
Right.
I'm not looking for, Christ is the head of the church, and the gates of hell should not prevail against it. We know that, man. We know that. But even after Jesus made that statement, Paul is writing letters to churches and cities, and these churches are dysfunctional sometimes. They have to deal with the culture. They have questions about doctrine. So even though that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church, real people got to deal with real problems and issues.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
so how would you frame the current state of the church?
Man, the one word that comes to mind for me is transition. Um, there's a lot of transition, and I'm right now. I'm speaking from a post-COVID perspective. Um, there's a lot that has gone on in terms of the culture's viewpoint of the church. I think more than any other generation in recent history, the world, society has the lowest view of the church that we've seen. Um, People do not view church the way that they viewed it in the past. People don't view church with as a necessity anymore. Church is just kind of something that you run to maybe if you have an issue, maybe if you are going through an emergency, or just maybe here and there just to check in, almost like when you go to get a checkup from your doctor. I'm gonna just show up every once in a while just so I can just make sure everything is good. I can kind of tell God, hey, look, here I am. Um, and that's where we and that's kind of what we see from our members. I have noticed though this year, 2023, there seems to be a little bit of a shift. I hope, just in terms of talking with my colleagues, and what we've noticed is that more people have come back. I know we've seen that at Drake Mills. A lot of members who've been gone since 2020 have started to come back, and our numbers have started to really bounce. We've had some people, even new families, that have come and placed membership with us. So we've seen some tremendous growth in just the first couple months of this year. But overall, in totality, um, ministry is looking different, church is looking different. So it's a huge transition. Now within our own fellowship, um, the one word that comes to mind is just suspicion. There's a lot of suspicion um, between older generation, younger generation, uh, Southern churches, Western churches.
Yeah.
It's just we treat each other with a lot of suspicion, as if um, there's an ulterior motive behind ministry, and that kind of breaks my heart a little bit because
Mm.
I'm a preacher who came into ministry. I never had a father in the gospel in terms of somebody that sits you down and like, hey man, these are some pitfalls of ministry. These are some things that maybe you want to avoid, some things to look out for. This is how maybe you should structure your week. This is how maybe you should run meetings. This is maybe some administrative ideas. I never had that. Always wish I did, but I never did. So when when I graduated and I took over the church, when I got there, Sam Means was terminally ill with cancer, and he passed away about 6 months after I got there. But when I got there, the plan originally was for me to go to grad school. I was doing my doctorate. I just started it. And they were just like, hey, we're going to give you half the load so you can finish your doctorate. And then by that time, man, you'll be ready to take over full time. But when I got there, I had to jump straight in with both feet because Sam was so ill, he couldn't even come to church. So mine was essentially baptism by fire. But what I noticed is that there was almost a reluctancy from some older preachers to kind of embrace the younger preachers. And I felt that even in our area,
Mm.
from a lot of the preachers in our area. And a lot of it boiled down to just sometimes there's misunderstanding. I came out of seminary. I came out with the tool set to study and to research. And of course, I'm going to preach what I study. That's the only thing I can be loyal to. I can't be loyal to how somebody else has seen it. I can't be loyal to how somebody else has preached it, or even what I've heard in the past. I just had to be loyal to what did I study from text for myself that I think God is telling me. And for some guys, man, some guys, I think that it sounded different. And I really don't think that we're saying different things. I just think that our vocabulary sometimes is different. And I think our message is the same, but sometimes there's a little bit more nuance. And so as I look at just some of the discussions online, I look at some of the discussions at certain conferences, or even when I talk to colleagues, that suspicion really breaks my heart, because both generations need this. The generation that came before us, before me, they were church builders. They were people who could take a couple people and build a church. A lot of us stepped into established churches. And now we found ourselves in this COVID generation of having to become church builders. And this is the best time to be able to pull on some of the seasoned ministers. Hey, how do you spiritually develop people to bring them in and bring in families and really work hand in hand? But I'm sure it's out there, and I'm sure that there's plenty of preachers working together. I'm pretty sure that I'm overgeneralizing, but just from my perspective, this suspicion is the one thing that I see within our fellowship that I find the most disappointing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think we need to work on those things. And I do not disagree with what you said. I think that we have to be intentional about bridging the gap, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this particular podcast. And you mentioned something earlier about COVID and how that has shaped churches, and we had to make changes. Even doing a podcast is something different, at trying to appeal to people. And then, I've always tried to be intentional of reaching out to younger preachers. And I don't say younger preachers to criticize, but I realize that, I'm 66, be 67 the end of this month. The Lord let me see February 27th. But I can think about older preachers who reached out to me when I was younger. And I think we have to continue that. And it's a work. I mean, it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that can be met and accomplished as long as we communicate. We got to communicate. We can't distance ourselves. And even though there's some mistrust, we got to talk about what those issues are. Why, and then we just got to be men about it and face it and move on. Well, let me ask this, Dr. Davis, what's in store for you, and what's in store for the Drayton Mills Church, going forward, post-COVID, mid-COVID, whatever, what do you guys have planned? What do you have planned personally, and how does the future look for the Drayton Mills Church?
Yeah, man, we are. I was actually talking with David Wilson. We were texting about this, and I told him, man, I said, I kind of feel like Satan has something big planned right now, because things at the church are just going a little too well, a little too smooth, a little too easy. But we actually just last week we brought in, 2 weeks ago, we brought in Andre Ashford onto staff, and he's tremendously gifted, man, both in song and preaching. So we brought him in as an associate minister. We have a lot of momentum flowing right now in Spartanburg, a lot. The mayor of Spartanburg is a member of the church. If you know Spartanburg, you know that it's a college town. There's like 7 colleges and universities in this city. The largest university is South Carolina, upstate. The new chancellor, the new president of that university, Black man by the name of Dr. Benny Harris. He and his family are members. The stars have been aligning in our church in terms of just being able to have a real big influence in the upstate and in Spartanburg in particular. And we're trying to run everything through the church building. We bought a facility that's about 40,000 square foot. We have a lot of space. We have a lot of 20 plus classrooms. We got banquet hall. We have a massive game room, a movie room, a big cafe. Like we've been able to really transition into a nice space. And the just the momentum that's flowing, the young families that are coming in with babies. We had a family just placed membership recently. They came in with 5 babies, all 10 and under, man. And
Yeah,
another
yeah,
family, this last week, they placed membership and signed up for ministries, man. And they got 4 little babies that are like all 6 and under. So it's
yeah.
always a good thing when you can see babies, and you can see the young ones running around. We're just trying to be active. I told them everything that we're doing this year is all about branching, creating branches in the community. Everything that we're doing is outward focused. Everything, even though it has some intentionality with our members, we have structured every ministry to be a point of invitation for family, friends, every single event. So now it's been awesome. This past Sunday we did our Heritage Sunday, in which I wanted people to invite those who are African spiritualists, those who believe that Christianity is a white man's religion. I was like, those people who grew up in the Black Panther movement or the Black Power. I said, this is their Sunday. You need to bring them to church. So, man, and I had a message tailored for that, right? I had a message tailored for that, in which I tried to lay out how God has always been a God of the oppressed. So,
Yeah.
And so every single thing that we've done, man, has just been really just focused on branching outwards. I had one of our guys call me this yesterday, and he said, man, "But David, I'm be serious, man. At some point, we might have to do two services." So I'm just kind of excited with just the momentum that's going right now with the addition of Andre. If you've ever heard him, he's just he's just tremendously gifted. So we are just trying to be serious about expanding the kingdom in Spartanburg and our influence in Spartanburg, and everything that we're doing, man. We're getting into the community. I said I charge us. We're going to do 3 or 4 just community events just outside of the church, period. But we're going on the college campuses. We are just blitzing, man. We're trying to. There's a billboard that's right on the main street. We're about to grab that and jump on the radio. It's just trying to blitz, man. Blitz the upstate. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's good news, man. That is good news. That is what we need to hear, and we're praying for you, and we know God is going to do some great things with the church there in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I want to thank you, man, for taking time out. I know you got a busy schedule, and for talking with me. And this will be on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. So I'm doing these preacher conversations, and just trying to connect and communicate, stay in contact with each other, and we can learn from one another, and we give God all the glory. Give your wife our regards, and take care of those children. You say you got 2 boys, 2 girls. You got your hands full, don't you? All right, okay, yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Davis, and we appreciate you sharing with us on today.
Okay, appreciate it, man. Thank you for the invite.
As I shared just a moment ago, these preacher conversations can be found on YouTube. The Arlington Road Church of Christ Facebook page. No, YouTube page. I'm sorry, the Arlington Road YouTube page. But it can be found on Somebody Must Come Preaching Facebook page. Also, we want to share that we're in partnership with the School of Religious Studies. Dr. Lloyd Harris is the president of that school. We're going to put up some information about that school before we close, because there may be someone interested in ministry, and you may not be able to go to a traditional school, but the School of Religious Studies offers evening and weekend classes. So we want you to take advantage of that. May God bless you. May He bless you real good.
Oh, how he walks the preacher introduces you to Jesus, and he lets you know that sometimes he'll talk with you, and